Okay, picture this. You open your Cambridge Information Technology 9626 exam paper. You see a question on data sources. You write down the exact textbook definition perfectly, word for word, and you walk out of the exam hall feeling incredible. But then results day hits, you look at your paper breakdown, and you realize you got absolutely 0 marks for that question. 0. How is that even possible? Well, what you're experiencing is the single most common, costly, grade-killing mistake that plagues AS-level IT students. Today, we're going to expose exactly what that mistake is, how it's literally destroying your method marks, and most importantly, how to fix it immediately using a very specific exam strategy. Let's get into it.
So, let's look at this classic definition you've probably seen 100 times. Direct data is collected for a specific purpose, while indirect data is collected for something else. Look, if you have ever written a sentence kind of like this in a past paper, you need to listen very carefully right now. This is a painful generic learner mistake, and it costs you precious method marks right out of the gate. Why? Because it treats the topic of direct and indirect data sources as just some disconnected definition. You see, Cambridge examiners do not give high marks for simply naming a concept or reciting a memorized sentence in total isolation. They are looking for something much deeper. And dropping a generic statement like this, that is exactly where the mark scheme leaves you behind.
And honestly, this perfectly illustrates what we call the 0-mark trap. Ordinary revision fails because it hyper-focuses on memorization instead of application. Cambridge examiners demand real-world scenario application. If the question gives you a specific context, maybe it's a payroll system, a monitoring system, a secure website, or a multimedia workflow, your answer must stay entirely within that context. Students so often know the theory inside and out, but they lose all their marks because they completely fail to anchor their explanation to the exact situation they've been given. The technology has to be linked to a practical consequence for the user or the organization, no exceptions.
All right, so before we apply anything, let's just make sure the actual theoretical foundation is crystal clear. Direct data is collected firsthand. It's gathered specifically for the current system and the exact problem it needs to solve right now. It is original. Indirect data, on the flip side, is sourced from third parties or existing archives. It was originally collected for a completely different purpose, but now it's being used for your current system. Once you really internalize this distinction, the terminology becomes a meaningful tool to solve a problem, not just a bunch of words you've memorized in isolation. But here is a major trap you need to watch out for. The theoretical foundations of IT often depend on distinguishing between nearby, closely related concepts. Some of the most typical AS-level IT errors pop up when students confuse these ideas. Like, you might confuse direct and indirect data, or validation and verification, or online and real-time processing. High-yield revision absolutely requires comparative thinking. Because think about it. If you don't know exactly where the boundary is between two similar concepts, the examiner is going to spot that confusion instantly. You have to be able to clearly differentiate them within whatever scenario they throw at you.
Now, in just a moment, I'm going to show you the examiner clue that changes your answer completely. It's the absolute secret to diagnosing exactly what the mark scheme wants from you. But if I show it to you right now, it honestly won't make sense. Leaving this explainer now means missing the key examiner clue that could bump you up an entire grade boundary. So first, you need the master framework that makes that hidden clue painfully obvious. Let's build that framework right now.
Okay, here is your disciplined path to top band marks. We call it the PEAL framework. Point, evidence, explanation, link, and judgment. You start by classifying the relevant data or hardware. That's your point and evidence. Then you clearly sequence how the process works. There's your explanation. Finally, and this is absolutely crucial, you link the explanation back to the scenario and provide a judgment on why it actually matters. This structure is a game changer because it perfectly mirrors the way method marks are earned in Cambridge extended responses. It literally forces you to connect theoretical mechanisms to practical consequences. All right, let's put this into practice. It is time for a quick spot the error challenge, and I really want you to actively think about this one. Imagine your exam scenario is about a company processing employee payroll. A student writes this exact sentence. The payroll uses direct data. I want you to pause for a second and predict. Why does this generic explanation completely fail to earn method marks according to the Cambridge standard? Think about the PEAL framework we just talked about. What is fundamentally missing here? So let's put on our examiner hats and break this down together. The flawed answer, the payroll uses direct data, is just naming a concept. It's super vague, right? Now look at the top band answer. The payroll collects direct data via timesheets, ensuring real-time accuracy for wage calculation. Do you see the difference there? The top band answer successfully anchors the technology to the specific scenario demand. It identifies the mechanism, which is the timesheets, it explains the consequence, ensuring real-time accuracy, and then it links it directly to the scenario's goal, wage calculation. That right there is exactly how you turn a zero-mark theory drop into a full-mark applied explanation.
To really drive this home, let's look at some principal examiner warnings. These are the classic rapid-fire wrong turns noted by actual Cambridge examiners. First up, vague wording. This means using terms without defining how they work in context. Second, omitting process steps, basically skipping the sequence of operations. Third, listing undeveloped points. That's just bullet-pointing features without actually explaining them. And fourth, honestly, the deadliest of all, ignoring the scenario. This is when you describe a technology perfectly, but completely fail to apply it to the hospital or the transport system or the financial service mentioned in the specific question. Avoid these pitfalls at all costs.
So, how do you make sure you never fall into those traps? You need to transform your passive reading into active, adaptable exam readiness. We do this using the 3-pass revision cycle. Pass 1, fix your key definitions and contrasts. Make sure you know exactly how direct data differs from indirect data. Pass 2, rehearse worked explanations and practical procedures. Actually write out the Peel framework for specific examples. And Pass 3, adapt to new contexts. Change up the scenario, mix in similar concepts, and force yourself to justify your choices. This layered style is vital because AS-level IT questions are constantly combining theory with applied reasoning.
And that brings us to a really reliable memory structure. Whenever you study a new concept in the 9626 syllabus, you absolutely must pass it through these 4 memory prompts. What is it? How does it work? Where is it used? And why is it better or worse than the alternatives in that specific situation? If you can answer those 4 prompts out loud smoothly, then your topic is truly ready for examination use. But if you stumble on any of them, you need to go back and rebuild the topic starting from the core contrast and a worked example. This is your ultimate practical checkpoint.
Okay, so you now have the Peel framework. You know exactly how to anchor your answers to the scenario. But here is a massive diagnostic cliffhanger for you. What happens if you misread the hidden command word? Seriously, what if the question asks you to evaluate, but your brain just decides to describe? Well, even with a perfect Peel framework, if you don't correctly diagnose the command word, which is that hidden clue deciding your entire mark band, you are going to write a brilliant top-tier answer to the completely wrong question. The examiner could be testing process explanation, comparative evaluation, or algorithmic logic. If you miss that signal, the entire framework falls apart.
That unresolved problem is exactly why understanding Cambridge command words is the absolute mandatory next step to solving this final exam puzzle. You literally cannot apply the framework without knowing what the examiner is secretly commanding you to do. So, to get that critical missing piece, you must watch our next explainer immediately. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, Ace the Exams, at acetheexams_IGCSE to excel in your Cambridge examinations. Seriously, do not walk into that exam hall until you know exactly what those command words mean. I'll see you in the next explainer. Because think about it. If you evaluate, when you were only asked to describe, did you really answer the question at all?